You've probably heard this one. 5,000 Roman soldiers marched north into the mist of Britain in the year 117, and are never seen again, swallowed by fog, by tribesmen, by the empty highlands, an entire legion erased in a single afternoon. It's a great story. Rosemary Sutcliffe turned it into a novel in 1954, The Eagle of the Ninth, and generations of readers since have grown up believing it's history. It isn't. And what the evidence actually shows is stranger and far less certain than the legend. The Ninth Legion, Legio IX Hispana, was not some obscure unit. It had been in Britain since the very beginning, part of the invasion force Emperor Claudius sent in 43 AD. It helped to put down Boudica's revolt in 61 AD, one of the bloodiest uprisings Rome ever faced on the island. By the early 2nd century, it was stationed at Eboracum, the fortress that would become the city of York, a battle-tested senior legion with a real and documented history. Then in the year 108, someone carved a building inscription at York recording the Ninth's presence there. And after that single stone, in the entire surviving record of Roman Britain, nothing. No further inscriptions. No further mentions. Silence. That silence is real. What people built on top of it is where the story gets complicated. In the 19th century, the German historian Theodor Mommsen, one of the most influential Roman historians who ever lived, proposed that the Ninth had been wiped out fighting northern tribes shortly after 108, its eagle standard lost, its survivors scattered or dead. It was a reasonable guess, built on a real gap in the evidence. Sutcliffe's novel took that guess and gave it a face, a plot. A young hero searching for his father's lost legion. And it worked so well as a story that it quietly became folk history. For decades, the Ninth marched into Scotland and vanished was taught almost as settled fact, not as the historian's hypothesis it actually was. Here's the question worth asking. What if the Ninth didn't die in Britain at all? What if the legion that supposedly vanished into the Highlands was, at that very moment, somewhere else entirely? Alive, intact, doing ordinary Roman legion things 1,000 miles away? On the lower Rhine, at a legionary fortress near what's now Nijmegen in the Netherlands, archaeologists have found roof tile stamps bearing the Ninth's mark, dated to a range spanning 104 to around 120 AD. In the 1990s, excavators there also recovered a fragment of a military medal, a falera, inscribed LESG HISP9. Taken together, this looks like direct evidence the Ninth was alive and stationed on the Rhine well after it supposedly died in Scotland. It's not that simple, and a good historian has to say so. Tile stamps mark where material was manufactured, not necessarily where the unit was standing at that exact moment. Bulk roofing tiles can sit in storage, get reused, travel with the unit's baggage years after they were made. Scholars genuinely disagree about how much weight the Nijmegen finds can bear. This is not a case where the mystery got neatly solved. It's a case where one confident myth ran into real, contested, unresolved evidence, and had to retreat. So where does the most careful modern research actually land? The historian Duncan Campbell, who wrote the most thorough recent study of this exact question, argues the Ninth was most likely transferred away from Britain sometime in the 120s, not destroyed there at all, and may have met its actual end later, far from where the legend places it. One possibility. Destroyed fighting in the Judean revolt of the early to mid-130s. Another, lost decades later further east against the Parthians. Neither is proven. Both are more consistent with the evidence than the version in the novel. What we're left with is not a solved mystery. It's a narrower one and a more honest one. The Ninth Legion almost certainly did not die dramatically in the Scottish mist. Somewhere after that, at some point nobody can currently pin down, it stopped existing. That's the actual state of the evidence, as of now. And here's what makes this stranger than a battlefield disaster. When Rome lost 3 entire legions in the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, the historical record screamed about it. Roman writers documented the catastrophe for generations. The Emperor Augustus, according to the historian Suetonius, was still crying out, "Quintili vare, legions rede." Varus, give me back my legions. Years afterward. That's what a real witnessed military disaster looks like in the Roman record. Loud, mourned, remembered. The Ninth got none of that. No lament. No memorial inscription marking a defeat. It simply stops appearing in the paperwork. Rosemary Sutcliffe wrote, "The eagle of the Ninth from a wheelchair." She lived with a form of juvenile arthritis since childhood, and she spent much of her life turning ordinary physical struggle into stories about endurance that didn't need to be flashy to matter. That's worth remembering before we're too hard on the myth she helped build. She wasn't inventing a lie. She was doing what humans always do with silence, filling it with a story that gives the missing an ending, and gives the reader something to hold on to. But the real record doesn't owe us a dramatic ending. Most disappearances in history aren't a single loud catastrophe you can point to on a map. Most of them look exactly like this. A name that shows up in the paperwork for decades, doing its ordinary work, and then one year, quietly, doesn't show up anymore. No battle scene, no elegy. Just an inscription that was never carved, in a record that was never kept. About a unit that was, until it very plainly wasn't. We keep reaching for the version with the mist and the ambush, because a mystery with a monster in it is easier to live with than a mystery that's just paperwork that stopped. But the honest version is the one still worth telling. Somewhere between the last stone at York and whatever came after, roughly 5,000 real men. Not a legend, not a plot device. Simply stop being written down. That is in its own quiet way still worth grieving.